I would like to come back to the Israeli-Iran tension. So I said that, Catherine Ashton in Astana, she launched some kind of negotiation with Iran, and then the Americans with Obama joined. And there was a big result with the 14th of July 2015 Vienna Agreement on Iran nuclear program. All went right. The International Agency of Vienna checked that Iran was fulfilling its obligations. And then Trump comes, withdraws from the accord that had been changed into a UN resolution. He withdraws. And the Europeans were unable to make the agreement go. The French and the Germans, they tried. It's a very complicated thing called in-text. I'm not going to enter into details, but they tried because they wanted to go on with this Vienna Accord, but they were not able to. The pressure on German and French companies from American Treasury was too great. So is there, Volker, is there any role for us left in trying to prevent a war between Israel and Iran, or we have to leave everything to Trump and Elon Musk, because we know that Elon Musk went to see the Iranian UN ambassador to maybe prepare a big bargain with Iran. I don't know. What is your assessment on that, Volker, please?
Look, thanks for the question. I think it's actually two questions. So one is, if you have two parties that are intent on confrontation, they will probably not ask the Europeans for advice. So if Israel or an Israeli government decides against all good advice, including good advice from the White House, to attack Iran big scale in order to destroy their nuclear program or the regime, the Europeans will have basically no means to prevent it. But preventive diplomacy starts before. And the GCPOA, or POA, or what you call the Vienna Accord, which was the first step to it, of course, was, and I would still commend it, it was a great achievement in preventive diplomacy, and it could have worked. It was a first step. There was a regional dimension mission, which the regional dimension was missing, which we were criticized for from the Gulf countries, and probably rightly so, but it was an enormously important first step, and the Iranians were prepared to comply with it. The Iranians didn't call it off. As you rightly said, it was the Trump administration, Trump 1, who unsigned it, as he said, and thereby basically destroyed it, and also including the pressure on European, French, German companies to not do business with Iran. I think right now, in preparing for the Trump administration and for the official legal end of the GCPOA, which is running out next year around this time, Europeans have a role again. And there's a discussion about snapback, which is a means of pressure on Iran, snapping back the UN sanctions on Iran. The Americans cannot do that because they are no longer part to the JCPOA. The Europeans can do it. And I think, as far as I know, I wasn't in the room, but in the discussions the European representatives had with the Iranian representative in Geneva 2 weeks ago or so, Europeans were very transparent and said, we want a deal. We will also support a US-Iranian deal if it comes. But if you're not going to play ball on the Iranian side, we would this time join the Americans to put more pressure on you, and we have the chance to get the snapback enacted and bring the sanctions back. At the same time, we are also, and we can be instrumental if after a deal between the Trump administration and Iran, sanctions have to be lifted for real, Iran has to be reintegrated into the region. I am very much in favor of any contact the president-elect of the United States has with the Iranians. I would be in the Itamar Rabinovich school here to think that in the end, President Trump, in his second tenure, would rather have a deal with Iran than taking the United States into another Middle East war, which will not be short. I know that many policymakers who start wars or generals who advise them are telling the public, oh, that this will be a very short war. But it never happens this way. George W. Bush was convinced that the war on Iraq would be very short. American troops are still there. So that's one thing, I guess, that Donald Trump instinctively understands. He doesn't want these forever wars in the Middle East anymore. You can discuss the way he made an agreement with the Taliban, which then Joe Biden had to implement, or he made an agreement, or he gave orders to withdraw his troops from Syria, which no one implemented. But he does not want to bring American troops into another war in the Middle East. So that's a good starting point for the Europeans to use their diplomatic skills and experience and resources and try to work for an agreement with the Iranians. I think there is a real chance here, also because, I mean, it's not that I expect the Iranians to say we have been defeated. No one really does it. But they have. They don't have air defense anymore. More importantly, their regional clout, which everybody exaggerated. Maybe we became victims to both Iranian and Israeli propaganda. The Iranians were saying, we are so big, we can dominate everything. And the Israelis said, look, the Iranians are so big, they threaten everything. And we sort of believed it in the end. Now, they have been standing rather naked there, right? They have not only been unable to deter Israel, much more important, they have been unable to protect their proxies, which means that their image, their aura in the Middle East is gone. So I guess they will have some hard discussions in Tehran, and I hope, but I basically also expect, that they will decide for building their own country, because that is what Pezeshkian has been elected for, and that means making up with the Europeans and the Americans over their nuclear program.
Thank you. Marc, I would like to have your assessment and on the main issue of a possibility of Iran-Israel conflict, and also your assessment of if you think it's realistic to have a big bargain between Iran and the West. As you know, in 2005, the Iranians proposed to America, to W. Bush, a big bargain, but W. Bush refused. So what is your assessment?
Yeah, but I think the situation is very different today. If you take a few facts, first, Iran is closer to nuclear breakout than ever. That's very scary for several actors in the region, and first of all for Israel. Second fact, Iran leaders, the previous ones at least, have pledged for the destruction of Israel. Third fact, Israel is weaker probably than ever over the past decades. It had a few strategic pillars in its strategy. The first one was proxies. I think it's fair to say that Iran lost its proxy war. The second one was ballistic missiles and drones to target Israel and perhaps other countries. A good part of these ballistic missiles and drones were destroyed, or at least proved ineffective to do real harm to Israel. The next fact is that Israel and Trump want to get rid of Iran's nuclear program. The question is how. So I think that it's more likely today than it was 6 months ago that some kind of military operation may take place. But I agree with what Volker said. The Iranians know they are weak. They don't have any air defense anymore. And so either they are very ideologically determined to continue as they have been for the past 4 decades now, and the result will be at some point a tragedy, or they will negotiate. And the deal is also on the table. We don't know exactly the term of the deal, but there will most probably be a proposal. I think that for the moment, all the options are open, but I think that the likelihood of a military operation is now higher than it was a few months ago.
Mohammed, let's say that that the idea of Elon Musk going to see the Iranian ambassador was to prepare a big bargain. And let's assume then, if it's confirmed by the Senate, Marco Rubio will call Americans allies of the GCC and ask to you, the GCC, okay, what kind of conditions you would like to be fulfilled in this agreement between, in the big bargain agreement between America and Iran? What would you answer, Emirates, Saudis, and others?
I think we will easily fall in a trap if we recognize that if we thought that this is the point of weakness of Iran and we need to hit it now, put conditions, it's defeated. I think that would be a big mistake. I think that we've seen so far a lot of changes in Iranian behavior. And those changes are not because of a military weakness alone. It has to do with their own legitimacy, which is connected to their own economic realities. They've looked at the region, and their biggest foe used to be Saudi Arabia, not because it's equivalent in size or power, but because they've seen themselves the leaders of the Shiite Islam when Saudi Arabia was the leader of Sunni Islam, and that's why. But now Saudi Arabia is not playing that game anymore. It's focused on geoeconomics. It's focused on a different type of revolution. It's an economic revolution. And Iran is left with that old ball in its hand, nobody else to play with. They have to be part of that. Now, if we wanted to say, that's good, this is the time, we hit Iran, let it destroy the regime, and then we become victorious, I think we will make a mistake. I think this is the time when we help Iran make the change and play according to the new games. And I think, we've heard Itamar talk about the two conditions for a grand bargain. I think the second condition is possibly already there. We don't have Iran using its proxies. And people say, no, it lost it because of Israel. Maybe. But also remember that Hezbollah agreed the demarcation of the marine borders for economic reasons, not because of military reasons. And actually, before the 7th of October, there were discussions on even an agreement, a demarcation of the land borders, which would have meant that there is a peace agreement between Lebanon and Israel. There is no contested borders, which means Hezbollah is not a resistance anymore. In my view, that is the right approach to do. And that means we have no problems now with Israel because we don't have a borders issue. Yes, we support the Palestinian case, but we are not in direct confrontation. This is what we need to do right now. A grand bargain, in my view, is far more possible. Not because the US can force it, because I think Iran needs it.